settle yourself in a comfortable place. Let your breath grow steady and calm as we take a gentle step away from the world of the present. Tonight, we journey back to a time when the cold season was not only a quiet backdrop to life, but a constant test of endurance. We return to the Middle Ages, an era of smoke-filled cottages, snowbound fields, and the rhythm of survival that guided the lives of countless peasants across Europe. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It is always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background, and let us ease into tonight's journey together. For the people of the medieval countryside, winter was more than a chill in the air. It was the ever-present weight of dwindling food stores, the uncertainty of illness, and the strain of keeping warm when wood was scarce and the nights seemed endless. Where we today can close a door against the weather, adjust a dial, or reach for a thick quilt, the people of the Middle Ages had little to shield themselves from nature's harshest months. Yet they endured, quietly, steadily, and year after year. In this episode, we will drift slowly through these frozen landscapes of the past. Together, we will trace the footsteps of peasants as they huddled in cottages of wood and wattle. We will pause with them at the empty hearth when firewood was low, and walk with them to barns where grain bins sat half empty long before spring returned. We will consider the Great Famine, when even the endurance of ordinary winters gave way to catastrophe. We will wander into the realm of mystery and tradition, where winter festivals offered light and hope in the darkness. And finally, we will catch the cold hardships of peasant huts with the relative warmth and comfort of noble halls, where the wealthy gathered by fires, clothed in furs and surrounded by abundance. This journey will not be hurried. Like the slow fall of snow across a quiet field, we will move at a steady pace, pausing often and allowing each image to take form in your mind. Imagine yourself listening to the creak of timbers in a cottage battered by winter winds. Picture the frozen earth outside, the pale light of short days, and the long shadows that stretched across the medieval world. As you listen, you may find that your mind begins to drift. That is welcome. This is history told not with urgency, but with calm reflection, designed to ease you toward rest. And if sleep should come before the end, you can be assured that the past will still be here, waiting for you whenever you return. Let us begin our journey, then, with the peasants themselves, and the winter cottages where they sought shelter against the cold. Imagine yourself stepping through the threshold of a medieval peasant's home in midwinter. The door is little more than rough planks, perhaps reinforced with a latch of wood or iron. It closes behind you, not with the tight seal of a modern frame, but with gaps that allow thin lines of air to creep in. The winter winds do not stay outside. They follow you into the room, curling about your feet and brushing against your skin. The cottage is small, its walls made of wattle and daub, woven sticks packed with clay and straw. This surface holds some warmth, but it is no match for deep frost. The roof above is thatched with bundles of reed or straw, which sag and darken in the damp. Smoke from the hearth drifts upwards, seeking escape through the thatch, staining the rafters black. The hearth itself is the heart of the cottage, yet it is humble. A shallow pit dug into the floor, or at best a raised stone platform, where a fire smolders with whatever fuel can be found. Logs, if the family is lucky enough to own land or rights to gather them. More often, bundles of sticks, brushwood, or dried peat cut from the marshes. On days of shortage, dried animal dung may be burned. It gives off heat, though it adds to the smoke that already clouds the room. This smoke lingers, for most cottages lack chimneys. Instead, the fire's fumes hang in the air, making eyes sting and lungs ache. To step inside is to enter a world hazy with soot, where every garment smells of smoke, and the walls themselves absorb its presence. Yet this smoke, irritating as it is, serves a hidden purpose. It helps preserve the thatch from insects and damp, and it slowly cures the beams of the house. The peasants lived with it, for they had little choice. Your eyes adjust to the dim light. Windows, if there are any, are not clear glass but small openings covered with oilcloth, thin horn, or wooden shutters. These allow in a muted glow during the day, but at night the cottage is lit only by the flicker of fire and the dim glimmer of rushlights, reeds dipped in tallow, which burn with a wavering flame and a faint greasy scent. The clothing of those within is thin by modern standards. Wool is the most common fabric, spun and woven by hand. A tunic or gown covers the body, with perhaps a cloak or hood for added warmth. Linen undergarments are prized, but often patched and worn thin. Furs, if present, are coarse and meager compared to the fine pelts owned by the wealthy. Feet are wrapped in simple leather shoes or even bound in cloth. The air inside the cottage is cold enough the breath forms faint clouds, and the garments offer only partial protection. Hunger is a constant companion. The harvest has long been gathered, and the stores of grain, beans, and salted meat are measured out with care. The family eats pottage, a thick stew of whatever grains, vegetables, and scraps can be found. Some days it is hearty, thick with peas or beans, flavored with herbs dried in the summer. On leaner days, it is little more than watery broth. Bread is dark and coarse, made from rye or barley rather than the fine white wheat flour reserved for the wealthy. Outside, the fields lie dormant beneath frost or snow. There is little to do but tend to animals, mend tools, and wait for spring. The rhythm of life slows, but worry quickens. Will the grain last? Will illness come? Will the roof hold against storms? Illness, too, is a shadow in the room. The cold weakens the body, and smoky air strains the lungs. Colds, fevers, and worse sweep through cottages where families huddle close together. There is little medicine beyond herbs, prayers, and hope. And yet, there is also endurance. The peasants knew no other way of life. Children played in the straw, women spun thread by the fire, men carved handles for tools or repaired harnesses. Stories were told, songs were sung softly, and the turning of the seasons was accepted as the natural order. In these cottages, amidst hardship and smoke, the rhythm of medieval life continued, generation after generation. You might think to yourself, in such a place, with such hunger, such cold, and such thin walls against the winter, that you would not last a day. And perhaps you would be right, but for them, this was not extraordinary. It was life. And from here, with this image of the cottage and the peasants within, we can move forward in our journey into a time when even these harsh winters grew harsher still. When the ordinary trials of hunger and cold deepened into a famine remembered across centuries. The medieval peasant's winter was already a struggle, even in ordinary years. Food grew scarce, warmth was fleeting, and illness often crept into households where families huddled together for comfort. Yet there were times when the usual hardships deepened into something far more severe. Among the darkest of these was the Great Famine, which swept across much of Europe between 1315 and 1317. To imagine this famine is to imagine winter never ending, or spring arriving only to bring disappointment. The rhythm of planting, growing, and harvesting, so essential to survival, was broken by years of unseasonable weather. Heavy rains fell when fields should have been drying. Crops withered in sodden soil, rotted before they could be gathered, or failed altogether. What little was harvested was often spoiled, moldy, or meager in yield. For the people of the time, there was no safety net. They could not import food from distant lands on a scale large enough to matter. Their lives were tied directly to the soil they tilled, the fields they walked, and the climate that shaped their harvests. When the rains came, relentless and unyielding, their cupboards emptied. The granaries grew bare. and the dread of winter was magnified many times over. Picture yourself in a village during those years. The memory of the last harvest is grim. Wagons that should have creaked beneath the weight of sheaves returned half empty. The miller had little grain to grind, and his millstone turned slower, producing coarse bread in smaller and smaller loaves. Families rationed their stores with growing anxiety, knowing that what they set aside might not be enough to carry them until the next harvest, and fearing that the next harvest might fail as well. By the winter of 1315, hunger gnawed not as a distant possibility, but as a constant presence. Peasants ate what they could find: bark stripped from trees, roots pulled from frozen ground, even the flesh of animals not usually slaughtered for food. The horses and oxen that once pulled plows, the working dogs that guarded homes, and sometimes, in whispers, even darker rumors of desperation. Bread, once the cornerstone of medieval diets, became scarce. When it could be found, it was coarse and bitter, mixed with substitutes such as ground acorns or the husks of grain. A loaf that once would have been humble became a treasure, passed carefully among family members, each tearing off only a small piece. Illness followed close behind. Malnutrition weakened bodies, making them vulnerable to fevers, infections, and the ever-present chill of damp cottages. Children grew frail, elders faded quickly, and mothers sometimes chose to feed their young before themselves. The famine was not only a test of strength, but also of sorrow. The sorrow of watching loved ones decline, powerless to help. Even the animals suffered. Livestock that survived the cull of hunger grew thin on poor forage. Fields that should have fed them were too wet to graze, and the hay stored for winter was consumed quickly. Without animals, the peasants had fewer resources to plant and plow when the rains eventually relented. It was a cycle that tightened its grip with each passing season. And still, the rains continued. In 1316, the weather did not improve. Another summer of damp, another harvest spoiled, another winter looming. Chroniclers of the time wrote of despair in villages, of beggars along the roads, and of towns where markets offered little but disappointment. Prices soared as scarcity grew. Even those who had coin found that it could not always buy what did not exist. The famine's impact reached far beyond the table. With food short, theft became more common. Tensions rose between neighbors. Lords who might once have been able to support their tenants found themselves equally pressed, for their estates yielded little more than the peasants' fields. Some communities held together, sharing what they could. Others fractured under the strain. It is important to pause here and remind ourselves, while these stories of desperation seem distant, they were lived experiences for countless people. For them, there was no guarantee that spring would bring relief, no promise that the rains would end. They endured day by day, measuring out each portion, clinging to hope that the next season would be kinder. Eventually, in 1317, the weather shifted. The rains lessened, fields began to dry, and though recovery was slow, it began. Crops improved, and with them came a fragile return to stability. But scars remained. Many villages had lost a portion of their people. Many families had buried children, parents, or siblings. The memory of those hungry winters lingered, carried forward in stories told by survivors and recorded by chroniclers. To us, the famine is a historical event. But for those who endured it, it was an unending present. Each morning brought the same question: how will we eat today? Each night brought the same worry: will we live to see spring? The Great Famine revealed how fragile life was when every meal depended on the mercy of weather and the fertility of soil. And yet, even in this darkest winter, there were moments of endurance. People still gathered by smoky hearths, telling stories to pass the time. Priests offered prayers, and churches rang their bells, urging faith that deliverance would come. In the silence of frozen fields, life persisted, clinging on against the odds. The famine eventually ended, but the memory of it shaped the generations that followed. It reminded them, and reminds us, of the precarious balance upon which medieval life rested. That a season of rain, a year of poor harvests, could change the rhythm of entire nations. As we leave behind this tale of scarcity and suffering, let us turn towards something different. For in the midst of long, dark winters, peasants also found ways to bring light. They carved out moments of joy and ritual, even when hunger weighed upon them. With feasts, with fires, and with traditions stretching back into the mists of pagan belief, they marked the passing of winter not only with endurance, but with celebration. And so, we step gently into the next part of our journey, the mystery of medieval winter festivals. Even in the harshest of winters, when cottages were smoky and food was scarce, the people of the Middle Ages sought out ways to brighten the long nights. Winter was not only a season of hardship, it was also a season of ritual, festivity, and community. These celebrations often carried echoes of older, pre-Christian traditions, woven together with the rhythms of the church calendar. To imagine them, close your eyes and picture a medieval village blanketed by snow. The fields lie silent, yet from the windows of cottages comes a faint glow, the light of fires and rush candles. Inside, families and neighbors gather together, their voices low, their spirits lifted by the rare chance to share in song, in food, and in memory. One of the most enduring of these festivals was Yule, a midwinter celebration whose origins stretched back into pagan practice. Long before Christianity spread across Europe, Yule marked the turning of the year, the winter solstice, when the longest night passed and days began, however slowly, to lengthen again. To those who depended on the cycle of the sun for their harvests, this moment was profound. The darkness was deep, but from that darkness came the promise of light's return. In the northern lands, the Yule log was burned, a massive piece of wood, carefully chosen and placed upon the hearth. It would smolder for days, sometimes even weeks, its warmth a symbol of endurance, its flames a token of the sun's eventual return. Families gathered around it, telling stories and sharing what food they had. Ashes from the Yule log were sometimes kept as charms, sprinkled over fields to encourage fertility in the year to come. As Christianity spread, these customs mingled with new ones. The church emphasized the celebration of Christmas, the birth of Christ, yet many older traditions were folded into the season. The singing of carols, for example, has roots in both religious and folk practice. Groups would go from house to house, offering songs in exchange for food or drink, their voices rising into the cold night air. Imagine the sound of footsteps crunching over snow, the faint glow of lanterns moving between cottages, and the sound of human voices carrying warmth against the silence of the frozen landscape. Feasting was another vital part of winter festivals. Even when food was scarce, communities often saved some of their best provisions for the season of celebration. A pig slaughtered in late autumn might provide meat for Christmas, carefully salted and preserved. Ale brewed in summer would be ready to drink, filling cups with a measure of warmth. On the tables of peasants, the fare might be humble: bread, beans, cabbage, perhaps a bit of meat or cheese. Yet the act of eating together, of sharing in what little abundance could be mustered, gave strength to the community. In towns and villages, certain days brought licensed revelry. The Feast of Fools, for example, turned order upside down. For a brief time, lower clergy might parody their superiors, or peasants might playfully mock the nobility. It was a moment of inversion, a chance to laugh at the seriousness of daily hierarchies, though always within the safe bounds of festivity. Across Europe, other customs appeared, each shaped by local tradition. In some regions, masks were worn, and mummers performed plays that blended humor with allegory. These performances, often held in the open air or in barns, offered both entertainment and a reminder of deeper truths about fortune, folly, and fate. Light was a constant theme. Candles were lit in greater number during the dark months. their flames carrying both religious symbolism and practical relief from the long nights. Churches glowed with tapers, and households saved tallow for extra lamps. Against the backdrop of a winter sky, the sight of many small flames flickering together must have seemed both comforting and mysterious. For children, winter festivals were times of wonder. The scarcity of daily life was set aside, if only briefly, for moments of joy. A toy carved from wood, a sweetened pastry flavored with honey, or simply the excitement of music and laughter filled them with delight. In these moments, the cold and hunger receded, replaced by warmth that was not only physical, but emotional. It is worth remembering, too, that these celebrations were deeply tied to the agricultural cycle. Winter festivals were not only about joy, they were about survival of the spirit. In gathering together, communities reaffirmed their bonds, strengthened their resolve, and reminded themselves that the darkness was not endless. By marking the passing of the solstice, by celebrating the birth of Christ, or by lighting fires and singing songs, they gave meaning to endurance. Imagine yourself there, in a timber-bird hall or a small smoky cottage. Outside, the snow falls steadily, muffling the sounds of the world. Inside, there is laughter, faint music from a pipe or fiddle, and the aroma of bread baking on the hearth. The crackle of the Yule log punctuates the voices, and a child, sleepy but happy, drifts off in the corner, soothed by the warmth of bodies and fire. Though centuries have passed, many of these traditions still echo into our modern celebrations. The evergreen tree brought indoors, the candles lit in windows, the sharing of meals with loved ones, all of these are threads woven from the distant past. To consider them is to realize how deeply connected we remain to those medieval villagers, how the cold season has always called forth both endurance and celebration. As winter festivals drew to a close, peasants returned to the ordinary rhythm of survival. The feasts ended, the candles were burned low, and the long stretch of winter continued. Yet the memory of those gatherings lingered, offering comfort against the cold days that still lay ahead. And so, from the warmth of festivity, we turn now to contrast. For while peasants endured smoke-filled cottages and clung to brief moments of joy, the nobility experienced winter very differently. Their lives unfolded in great halls hung with tapestries, their meals heavy with meats and spices, their cloaks lined with fur. To step into their world is to see how winter, for some, was not only survivable but a season of luxury. Let us move then into our final segment, Noble Life by the Fire. While the peasantry endured the smoky cottages and rationed bowls of pottage, life for the nobility during winter was of an entirely different character. The contrast is striking. Two worlds existing side by side, yet separated by wealth, status, and privilege. For the noble classes, winter could be, in its own way, a season of comfort and even splendor. Imagine stepping away from the frost-covered fields and entering a great hall within a medieval castle or manor. The first sensation is warmth, a rare and precious thing in the Middle Ages. A massive hearth dominates the hall, its fire roaring with logs far larger than a peasant might ever afford to burn. The flames send waves of heat into the chamber, flickering light dancing over the stone walls and the heavy wooden beams overhead. These walls, unlike the thin daub of a cottage, are hung with thick tapestries, woven with colorful designs, scenes of hunts, battles, or biblical stories. They are not only decorative but practical, helping to insulate the space against drafts. On the floors lie rushes or straw, often mixed with herbs for fragrance, replaced periodically to keep the hall fresh. The nobility dressed for winter in garments far finer than woolen tunics and patched cloaks. They wore layers of fabric dyed in rich colors, deep blues, vibrant reds, and greens that peasants could scarcely dream of affording. Cloaks and mantles were often lined with fur, fox, squirrel, or even ermine for the wealthiest. Hoods were edged with soft trimming, boots lined with warm material, and gloves crafted with care. Against the cold, they were far better prepared, and against hunger, better shielded still. Food in noble households was abundant compared to that of peasants. The larders of castles were stocked not only with salted meats and bread, but also with luxuries transported from afar. Spices such as cinnamon, ginger, and cloves flavored dishes, their exotic scents filling the hall. Meat pies, roasted fowl, venison from the hunt. All of these could appear on the tables of nobles, even in the depths of winter. Where peasants drank thin ale, nobles might sip wine imported in casks or stronger ale brewed to their taste. Feasts were central to noble life in winter. The long nights became occasions for gathering, for displaying wealth, and for reinforcing social bonds. Tables were laid with silver or pewter. Candles glowed in sconces, and minstrels provided music. Imagine the sound of a harp string plucked, the melody of a flute, or the beat of a drum echoing beneath vaulted ceilings. Conversation hummed around the hall, punctuated by laughter and the clatter of dishes. Beyond food and warmth, there was entertainment. Nobles played games, chess, dice, or board games like tables, the ancestor of backgammon. They told stories, much like the peasants, but often with themes of romance, chivalry, and adventure. Troubadours and poets might recite verses, weaving tales of distant lands or heroic deeds. These evenings by the fire were not merely diversions. They were affirmations of culture, status, and refinement. Winter for nobles also meant hunting. Though the fields lay fallow, the forests teemed with game. Hunts were organized as grand affairs, with riders, hounds, and horns. To step into the woods, cloaked in fur and surrounded by attendants, was both sport and display, a reminder of power over land and beast alike. The spoils of the hunt often returned to the hall, filling the kitchens with venison or boar to be roasted and served. Education and administration also continued through the winter. Lords managed their estates, hearing disputes, collecting rents, and planning for the year to come. In the quieter months, when travel was difficult, there was time for reading, for those who could, and for contemplation. Manuscripts illuminated with vivid colors were unrolled by candlelight, and priests offered instruction or spiritual counsel. For noble women, winter often brought the work of embroidery, weaving, or overseeing the running of the household. And yet, even amid luxury, there were limits. Castles, for all their grandeur, were not entirely free from the cold. Drafts crept through arrow slits, and corridors away from the hearth were often frigid. Servants shivered as they carried trays or fetched firewood. The stone walls could feel damp, and without constant tending, fires could falter. Nobles were not untouched by the season, but their discomforts were softened compared to the struggles of those outside their walls. It is worth pausing here to reflect on this contrast. For peasants, winter was survival, smoky air, thin clothing, and rationed meals. For nobles, it was a season of roaring fires, richly seasoned dishes, and music echoing through grand halls. Both groups lived within the same world, yet their experiences of winter could not have been more different. Imagine, then, leaving the warmth of the hall. The laughter fades, the music grows faint, and you step back into the night air. Outside the castle walls, frost glitters on the ground. The fields lie still, and peasants walk homeward to their cottages, cloaks pulled tightly around them. The great divide of medieval society is felt most deeply here. One world of abundance and another of scarcity, separated by walls both physical and social. And so, as our journey through medieval winters draws to its close, we carry with us these contrasting images. The smoky cottage, the famine-stricken fields, the glowing candles of winter festivals, and the roaring hearths of noble halls. Together, they form a portrait of a season that tested the endurance of the Middle Ages, in all its hardship and in all its mystery. From here, we will take one final step into our conclusion. A gentle reflection on what it means to consider those winters of the past, and how they remind us of the comforts that surround us today. And so, our long journey through medieval winters comes to an end. We have wandered slowly through cottages of smoke and shadow, where peasants shivered in woolen cloaks and rationed bowls of pottage. We have paused at the famine years, when rains drowned the harvests and hunger gnawed at every household. We have stepped into moments of light, the candles of winter festivals, the Yule log smoldering in the hearth, the laughter of neighbors gathered together in defiance of the cold. And finally, we have crossed the threshold of noble halls, warmed by roaring fires, tapestries, and abundance, where winter became a season of comfort rather than fear. Each of these glimpses, when pieced together, gives us a fuller picture of how the Middle Ages endured its most testing season. Winter was not only a matter of cold and hunger. It was a mirror of society itself. It revealed divisions of wealth and status, yet it also revealed the universal rhythms of human endurance. Whether huddled in a cottage or seated in a great hall, people looked to fire for warmth, to food for strength, and to one another for company. Close your eyes if you wish, and let the images settle in your mind one last time. Picture the quiet snow drifting across fields that will not be plowed again until spring. Imagine the faint glow of firelight through the shutters of a peasant's cottage, smoke curling into the night air. See the villagers gathered in a church at Christmastide, voices raised together in a hymn, their breath forming small clouds in the cold. Then shift your gaze upward, toward the towers of a castle, where laughter and music echo late into the evening. The two worlds coexist, close yet separate, bound together by the same season, yet divided in how they experienced it. When we reflect on these winters, there is a kind of gentle humility that comes with the thought. To us, winter may be inconvenient, sometimes even difficult, but rarely life-threatening in the way it once was. We close our doors tightly against the wind, wrap ourselves in layers of fabric far warmer than anything peasants could have dreamed of, and fill our kitchens with food that has traveled across oceans. Our struggles are of another kind, and the comfort of warmth, light, and abundance is so constant that we easily forget how fragile survival once was. The peasants of the Middle Ages did not forget. For them, each winter was a test that could not be avoided, and yet they found ways to endure. Their endurance was not dramatic or heroic in the way of kings or knights. It was quiet, steady, and uncelebrated. It was the endurance of repairing a thatched roof before the storms came, of grinding the last of the rye into coarse bread and dividing it carefully among a family, of telling stories by the hearth to pass the hours when the night seemed too long. It was this rhythm, repeated across countless winters, that allowed entire generations to survive. From famine to feast, from darkness to light, winter was both a trial and a teacher. It taught patience. It taught the importance of storing away grain and firewood, of planning for seasons that had not yet arrived. It taught resilience, that even when hunger and illness seemed to press too closely, life could endure, quietly and persistently. And it taught community. For no family, no peasant, no village survived the cold season alone. They depended on one another for shared work, shared food, shared prayers, and shared warmth. As we drift gently away from this history, let us linger on one final thought, that the comforts of our present are built upon the endurance of the past. The warmth you feel now, the bed you rest in, the food that waits in your kitchen, all of it shines more brightly when contrasted with the smoky cottages and thin clothing of medieval winters. Their hardships remind us not only of human fragility, but of human strength. And so, dear listener, as you let your eyes grow heavy and your breath steady, allow these images to dissolve into quiet reflection. Imagine yourself safe in your own shelter, warm and protected, the night passing gently outside your window. The medieval peasants once listened to the same winds, the same silence of falling snow, the same rhythm of winter's stillness. You shared it with them across centuries. And unlike them, you need not fear what tomorrow brings. The past is not gone. It is simply quiet now, a memory waiting in the dark. And as you rest, you carry its lessons lightly with you. That life endures, that seasons change, that even in the longest nights of history, warmth and light can be found. May the story of their winters ease you into your own night, calm and steady. May the rhythm of their lives remind you of your own quiet strength. And may sleep come softly, carrying you, like them, through the long winter night. Good night.